Focalors is perhaps the most unique Archon amongst the 7 we've met so far. Do you know why? It's because she's the first Archon we know about who is a human turned into a god. Now obviously her path to humanhood was a bit different than that of ordinary humans, but she got there nonetheless thanks to Egeria. However, therein lies the problem. As a being who was made to enjoy the benefits of living in this world, fit to guide us, Focalors' tenure as Archon was that of which only a human is capable of. Aside from being the shortest, clocking in at a whopping 500 years, it was also epic in scale, grand in nature, and went out with a bang. But was it good? Was Focalors a good god, much less an Archon? The answer is, it's complicated. While yes, she managed to defy a centuries-old prophecy and save an entire nation, the way she went about it was extremely suspect, with even someone like Neuvillette, who benefited the most from what she did, criticizing some of her actions.
This is a topic that has been discussed ad nauseum. I don't mean to condescend to humanity, but it is quite clear to me that society's concepts of justice, fairness, equality, and rule of law are not equivalent, and never can be. Now, of course, water always seeks its own level, and it was in this spirit that the previous Hydro Archon, Egeria, hoped to achieve universal equality by connecting all things with love. Her successor chose instead to seek equality by means of the law. Ultimately, due to various external factors, this unfortunately manifested itself in the distorted form of trials for the sake of trials. Nevertheless, there are reasons for everything. I suppose I should refrain from criticizing her.
While I'm not going to focus on this aspect of Focalors' rule, the entire warping of a nation's ideal to fit the plan of having as many trials as possible to accrue power is a bit mad. Further turning these trials into a spectacle for all to marvel at is also something. I mean, bro, just look at this crowd of niggas, bro. It's like the circus, and they all just get to add their own input like it's a classroom.
What's with this verdict? Is your justice machine malfunctioning?
Huh? This has never happened before.
Shut the fuck up! The part I wanted to zero in on was Focalors' use of Furina in helping to avert the prophecy, because in my eyes, it's this part that's very unbecoming of a god. While one could argue she coerced Furina into playing the Hydro Archon, one thing is certain. The god of justice Focalors robbed the human Furina of her free will. While this raises interesting ethical questions as it pertains to how a god should act, it's actually quite becoming of an average human. We are indeed well versed in the art of using lesser beings for our plans. And while yes, Focalors and Furina do stem from the same person, ultimately Focalors was a god and Furina was a human, and each were distinct beings separate from one another, as Focalors does recognize this.
But in my eyes, Furina's humanity was what made her perfect. She was perfectly human in every way. The person I always wanted to be.
So what exactly happened between these two? Well, it all started some 500 years ago when Focalors ascended to become a god so as to serve as the Hydro Archon of Fontaine following Egeria's death. However, once Focalors assumed the position of Archon, she had been left with a myriad of problems by the previous Hydro Archon Egeria.
Between the task of saving the nation, the quotidian duties of the Hydro Archon, and not to mention the original sin of creating a new race of humans, I dare say she left me quite a colossal mess to clean up.
She deemed the prophecy the most essential of the problems, and after thinking it through, she decided to separate her divinity from her body and spirit. While she became one with the Oratrice, accumulating in Dominion to destroy the Divine Thrones, she tasked her human counterpart Furina with playing the part of the Hydro Archon, cursing her so as to ensure she wouldn't age nor die so long as Focalors remained. Despite being hinted at by Focalors that this would be no easy task, Furina accepted her fate regardless, arguing the many peoples of Fontaine's lives outweigh her own suffering. Through extreme mental anguish, Furina would then go on to play the part of the Hydro Archon, all the while trying to research her own way to save Fontaine from the prophecy, while also keeping an eye out for the trial to end all trials. Fast forward 500 years, and eventually that big trial Furina was waiting for happened, except she was the one being tried. With that last bit of juice, Focalors seemingly had enough power to kill the Hydro Archon and destroy the Divine Throne, saving Fontaine from the prophecy. That's an extremely abridged version of what happened, but it serves its purpose nonetheless. However, Focalors' questionable use of power, in addition to robbing her human counterpart of her free will, really call into question what kind of god she is. Was she a god who recognized that desperate times called for desperate measures and simply did what she had to do, or was she an inadequate god who needlessly caused the suffering of her human counterpart. Because, let's not forget, it seems like Furina only came about as a result of the plan?
Do you still remember the final scene of the prophecy? The Hydra Archon alone, weeping on her throne. In order that the prophecy might appear fulfilled, I invited Furina to be an actress, to play the part of the Hydra Archon in the prophecy.
If Furina was created solely for the purposes of playing a part in the prophecy, then what we observe in this interaction truly is the illusion of choice, because she had none in the matter, as this is what she was created for. This can help to explain why when we first see Focalors and Furina interact, Furina claims her mind is a bit hazy, but the only thing she knows clearly is the prophecy.
What prophecy? Wait. I know. I think. I don't know why, but it's in my head somehow. What's going on? I can't seem to remember anything clearly. The only thing I know for sure is this prophecy. Will it really come to pass?
However, let's say Furina really did have a choice when Focalors invited her to play the part of a god. Is it okay for a god to ask a human to sacrifice himself to save everyone else? And for those thinking I'm being dramatic by using the word sacrifice, I don't think I am. It was only moments after Furina was created that she was thrust into the role of being someone completely different than who she was. In these brief moments, we get to see who Furina was at the time, a shy girl who was full of self-doubts. These characteristics, among others we never got to see, have all but been eroded away thanks to her having to be someone vastly different than who she really is. Now that's not to say they're all gone completely. She still obviously shows shy characteristics and does have a bit of self-doubts, but as she says herself, she's no longer capable of fully separating herself from the person she was portraying, and that's why the current Furina is an amalgamation of both the real Furina and the Hydro Archon Furina. The worst part is, the Hydro Archon part of Furina isn't even one she had control over. This loud and proud god was born of the people's desires for a god riddled with vanity and hubris, and as such, Furina had to pivot greatly from the god she thought she wanted to play. It is in this sense that Furina has died, and is that okay? Sacrifice one for the many? This is presumably one of the many things Focalors probably thought about at the bottom of the ocean, and I imagine a lot of you would probably say, yes, the lives of many outweigh the lives of one! Now I gotta stop, man. Why do I keep giving y'all that same whiny voice? I gotta give y'all like a Giga Chad voice. The lives of many outweigh the lives of one, nigga! Yeah. Furina would agree with you, funny enough, and use an interesting utilitarian analogy for the problem in which she said this.
If there were scales, with all the people of Fontaine on one side, and my pain on the other, is it not obvious where the scales should tilt?
Furina did something interesting here. She assigned values to human lives, and said the lives of all the people in Fontaine outweigh her own. The problem with this is that you then imply that there are things that could be more valuable than a human life. So, assuming the other perspective that a human life is invaluable, and we turn to mathematics, we can see the addition of two infinite quantities in the same cardinality is still the same cardinality. So what this means is if one human life is priceless and infinite in value, and we have a group of humans whose lives each hold infinite values, both the singular person and the group of people's lives weigh the same, because infinity plus infinity is infinity. In this sense, Focalors doing nothing and letting the prophecy happen would have been the morally acceptable action. However, I'm sure we can all agree an entire nation's life is worth more than that of the individual. Regardless, the most egregious of Focalors' actions was directly intervening in the fate of a human and making Furina play the part of the Hydro Archon. Her free will was taken from her, which is something that even Focalors herself acknowledged.
Under the curse I placed on her, so long as I, Focalors' divinity, continued to exist, she could not die. But nor was she free to live her life in the pursuit of happiness.
For those saying, well, she consented, I mean, I guess? Did she really have a choice when told that if she doesn't, everyone in Fontaine will die? Furina being robbed of her autonomy also goes against what Focalors herself had in mind when she created Furina.
She could feel joy, sorrow, and everything in between. She could be as vain and conceited, or as meek and vulnerable as she wished.
she couldn't be any of these things because she never got to choose. She was forced into being a vain and obnoxious god for her plan, and it's only now that the prophecy is over that she can now choose, but like we mentioned earlier, the damage to her persons is already done, and Furina can no longer draw the line between her real self and the performance. Ultimately, there's a lot of moral quandaries involved in Focalors' actions, and as such, there may not be a right answer as to whether or not she was a good god. I simply think she had to do what was necessary for the greater good, and yeah, as such, I think she is a good god. That doesn't mean I'm right, it's, it's just what I think, but we all know I'm an ends justify the means kind of guy.